Welcome once again to SoCo Chat, a podcast where we hear directly from county leaders, discuss the latest news, and talk about all things concerning our beautiful corner of California known as Sonoma County. Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to SoCo Chat. I'm your host once again, Paul Gullickson, Communications Manager for the County of Sonoma, and we thank you for joining us. It's no secret that the Trump administration and the Republican-controlled Congress have made some deep cuts in federal spending and put new restrictions on other forms of funding, including grants and other programs. It's also no secret by now that these cuts are going to have a significant impact at the local level. How much of an impact? Well, that's going to be the topic of a special meeting of the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, October 14th, beginning at 4:30 in the board chambers here at the county offices at 575 Administration Drive in Santa Rosa. As Supervisor Linda Hopkins, the chair of the Board of Supervisors, said in a statement this week, quote, "Make no mistake, the draconian budget cuts and benefit requirements that are coming from the federal government will have a huge impact locally. We need to be ready with a plan as we prepare our budgets going forward. The first step is that process is to take stock of all the impacts." Now, that first step will occur Tuesday. At the meeting, we will hear from county department heads as well as other partner organizations in the community who are also feeling the pinch of federal budget cuts. To discuss all this with us, our guest today is Deputy County Administrator Peter Bruland, Sonoma County's budget guru. But before we get to Peter and our interview, we want to start, as always, with our trivia question. Our question today is this: what percentage of the county's total revenues come from state and federal sources? If you know, call us at 707-565-2242 or email us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. And if you're correct, you'll have your pick of SoCo Chat prizes, including a SoCo Chat mug or a water flask or one of our others. So again, the question is, what percentage of the county's total revenues comes from state and federal resources? Now, I know somebody who knows that answer, but he's not going to say it right out of the bat, and that is our guest today, Peter Bruland. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's get started. Let's start with an overview of the federal budget bill known as H.R. 1, the so-called Big, Beautiful Bill. While it certainly is big, I'm not sure it's particularly beautiful in the eyes of many people. For example, while it makes permanent some federal tax cuts that were set to expire at the end of this year, it's projected to raise the nation's national debt by some $3.4 trillion over the next 10 years. It also includes the largest cuts to Medicaid in the program's history. And because of these changes, experts are predicting some 10 million or more people are expected to be uninsured by 2034. Peter, there's a lot of controversy about this bill back and forth. Are these some of the things that will be discussed at Tuesday's board meeting, the special meeting?
Well, as far as the deficit, what's a few trillion between friends? I think
pretty soon we're talking about a lot of money.
I think, really, if we're looking at deficits, you have to think about it in terms of the total GDP. And I think technically when you look at a 3 trillion increase on top of whatever 37 trillion or whatever it is now, what you're talking about is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But getting away from the technical terms, yes, we will be talking a lot about H.R. 1 and its impacts. And in particular, we're really going to focus on a lot of its changes to the safety net programs. You mentioned people losing insurance, and that's something that's going to be happening in Sonoma County. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge part of the services that the county provide, are those safety net services, and we can get more into those in a second. But let me talk about the elephant in the room. Much of the national conversation this past week has been focused on the shutdown of the federal government. Will that be part of this discussion as well?
Well, when we were planning for this, of course, there was no shutdown.
Yeah.
And so we were really trying to look at those permanent and long-term implications that are going to happen whether or not the government reopens. But we will also be talking a little bit about the shutdown. Mm-hmm. And just whenever we do talk about that, I want to reiterate that entitlement programs, things like Social Security, Medicare, those will continue.
Yeah.
A lot of the safety net programs that we'll be talking about in the context of HR 1 are pre-funded for some window of time, so we're not seeing big impacts right now. But if this stretches into November, we are going to start to see bigger impacts.
Yeah. So the bigger thing, part of the conversation on Tuesday, are the long-term impacts. Whether the government shutdown is settled and the government reopens or not, we're still going to have these impacts in the long run. So it's important to take stock in that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's really going to be our focus there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, concerning the budget cuts and the local impacts, are you going to provide some? Are you going to be providing some specific numbers on Tuesday concerning the local funding?
We really don't have a lot of real specific numbers. There will be some in there, but right now we're still waiting to see how all of this is going to trickle down to the county. But what you are going to hear a lot about on Tuesday is the impacts on people.
Okay.
We have 135,000 people approximately in our county who are Medi-Cal recipients. We have something like 40,000 people who receive CalFresh benefits. And not all of them will be impacted, but some portion of them are going to be impacted by all of this. We also have, certainly our immigrant community, our LGBTQ plus community. These are groups that are already feeling impacted and targeted. And so I think, I'll be talking about the money, and that's a very important part and helps drive some of this. It's really looking at the impacts on people.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point to make. And that's a good segue. So we, like you said, we will be talking about some budget numbers, but we're going to be looking at the overall bigger impacts to the people in the community. So who else will the public be hearing from at this special board meeting?
So we have a good group of people. In addition to myself, we'll have our Ledge Affairs coordinator, Will Tosconi from the County Administrator's Office. We are going to have the Departments of Health and Human Services and the Community Development Commission, all of their leaders there, who are really our largest recipients of federal funding and do work the most with this. And then we are going to have representatives from the Sonoma County Office of Education, because education, while it doesn't fall under the county rubric and is not something the Board of Supervisors controls, is also seeing their own impacts in the federal changes and a lot of cuts. And we're also going to have some of our nonprofit partners who help support the safety net services or who work with disproportionately impacted communities that will be there.
Yeah. And these are nonprofits like Redwood Empire Food Bank, Catholic Charities, ones that are deeply connected with people in our community and can really see the trends that are happening out there.
Yeah, and that's really, again, the point is to try and get at what people are seeing beneath what we have.
Yeah.
And some of them are direct recipients of federal funding. A lot of them, maybe some receive it through the county, and some, may not be directly receiving federal funding, but again, they're seeing those impacts further down the chain.
Yeah. Well, it'll be very interesting to hear what they all have to say. Now, let's look at the county's fiscal year budget 2025-26, which was just adopted at the end of June for the fiscal year that started July 1st. How big is the county's budget, and how much of the county's overall revenue comes from federal funding?
So the total budget is about $2.7 billion.
Okay.
And that includes the county proper and also special districts under the board like Sonoma Water. Of that total, about 14% is federal funding, which might not sound like a huge portion, but it's $387 million approximately.
That's a big chunk.
And, for comparison, our largest discretionary source is property tax. And this federal funding is more than that. That's more like 350, 360.
Okay. Well, it's still, like you said, that sounds, at some point, that's a lot of money. And that's still, so which departments rely on federal funding the most?
So it really is our safety net providers. The Community Development Commission, I think, may have some of the largest percentage, along with Child Support Services. And then it's our Health Services and Human Services departments are very much the biggest.
Yeah, and the CDC, they're involved in like voucher programs,
Mhm.
HUD funds, housing assistance. That's those sort of funds which come from the federal level.
Yeah, so they're all of those that they are providing the housing support, a lot of the vouchers, and really just in general, a lot of the programs that you might think of as federal or state actually pass through the county and get administered on the ground by the county.
Right.
So we're the ones who are signing people up for programs like CalFresh and CalWorks and Medi-Cal. And we're involved with a lot of those sorts of programs. And that's really the biggest chunk of where our federal funding is coming in, is through these sort of federal mandated programs that we administer at the county level.
Okay. So we're going to hear about from many of these safety net programs about the impacts that they're feeling right now. But as you say, it's kind of a moving target, and we're trying to really get a sense of what it's going to be like next year.
It is, and it's important to note, HR1's impacts don't all hit at once.
Right.
So we actually have not felt most of the changes yet. We have some changes to CalFresh in terms of eligibility requirements, work requirements, and eligibility for immigrants. But most of the Medi-Cal changes are going to start hitting next October.
At the end of next year, or the fall of next year?
Then at the end of, in the fall and winter of next year.
Okay.
Or then at the end of the year is when the work requirements hit.
Yeah.
And so that's really when we're going to start, and the community will start really feeling those.
Okay. What about infrastructure projects? Can you give us some examples of the projects the county is able to complete as it gets federal funding for?
Certainly. So outside of the safety net, infrastructure funding is far and away our largest portion of federal funding. And it provides a lot of money for bridges, some for roads, a lot of that infrastructure. It also is our primary source of funding for capital improvements at the airport and keeping the airport going. So that is a major source there. In addition, hazard mitigation grants. We've been successful at getting a lot of these grants that help us prepare ourselves to make sure that when future disasters do hit, they don't hit us as hard. That's, obviously federal funding, and then our FEMA support for rebuilding after some of our disasters. So money to repair our roads and do some of this.
Yeah, and we have a few of those in our recent history, and so we're still waiting for funding from some of those areas, I recall.
Yeah, we still have a backlog, a lot of funding we're waiting on, and we're hopeful that we will still be receiving that, and nothing in what's passed so far would stop us from receiving that. Yeah. But it is, still a lot outstanding.
Yeah.
I would just also emphasize that a lot of this infrastructure funding, we think of it as one time. It shows up in our budget as one-time funding. You'll see me call it out on the slides as one time, but it's funding we count on year after year.
Yeah.
There's going to be another pot, as I said, for our airport, when we do improvements for these large infrastructure bridge projects, that sort of thing. We count on there being that money available that we can apply for and get. Not always as much as we want, but
it's out there, and we've counted on it. Well, let's talk about the threats that we know to the county's federal funding. I mean, we've had some cases where county programs that depend on federal funding or promised by federal funding have been canceled or pulled. Do you have an example of that we know of?
Sure. Our largest example of that is the BRIC funding, is Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities funding, and this was a grant that we were approved for a number of years ago under the Biden administration to really put in place wildfire hardening and preparation around the county. And we received the first tranche of funding to do sort of studies around it and work on that, and some good work came out of it. But we had a second tranche of about $40 million that we were expecting to receive, had been promised, that have been canceled by the administration. And that was funding that was really going to go toward actually enabling people to do those improvements. So, we've identified a lot of things that people can do, but this was not just $40 million to go into county coffers or county projects,
Right.
but to really go support work in the community to make people safer.
And to make our whole community safer.
Yes.
Yeah. And well, that's certainly heartbreaking, knowing that's kind of in flux. Well, this administration has also made clear that federal funding in some cases comes with strings attached. We may not be losing the funding, but suddenly now there are new restrictions on them. For example, the county's been told that in order to receive some grants that have been awarded, including the $10 million grant for the airport runway, the county needs to fully cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and or eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Do you have other examples of federal grants or funds that fall into that category? And what are our legal remedies that the county is pursuing?
So, as you mentioned, we've received updated language from a number of federal departments, transportation being one of them, HUD another, Housing and Urban Development. And really the expectation is we're going to start seeing that across the board. And so I really think of this as kind of like the nuclear threat, because it potentially could just wipe out everything indiscriminately, not just what are things that the administration likes or doesn't like, but could be a threat to all of our funding. Now, we're not alone in receiving this, obviously. This is going on across the nation, and a lot of jurisdictions are taking action. So we have joined as a county on several lawsuits related to tying funding to unrelated policy areas. We do have injunctions on a couple of those cases that are allowing us to receive some of that funding in advance. And so, we are really actively working on that to see how it will come. Now, I'm the budget guy, not the lawyer, and you will hear more from county council about that and where those...
And those, as my understanding, those will be summarized at the meeting on Tuesday, where we are with some of these lawsuits, right?
Yes. So we will have some of the actual lawyers to come and tell us a little more about where those lawsuits are, the status of that, and what the future might hold. Yeah.
And so, because in some cases, it's really the county's not in a position to abide by some of these restrictions. For example, under the California Values Act, the county's required not to work with ICE without a warrant, and yet these new federal restrictions would direct that if we want to have this money in these grants, we have to comply with any directive requests from ICE. So the county's sort of stuck in a catch-22 in that sense. So,
yeah, it really is. I think we have sometimes competing requirements from the state and the federal government.
We've been there before.
And that's, something you get at the lower levels of government in this country. But I think it's really looking at both how do we comply, but also how, for our board, how does it look at its values?
Absolutely.
Think about where it stands.
And our mission and serving our communities. Well, so given that we have these cuts coming, could the Board of Supervisors tap into general funds to help people who lose their benefits or risk losing their benefits to replace the loss of these federal funds?
Well, unfortunately, not dollar for dollar, and not really in the same ways people are losing them.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that a lot of these programs are things where we only touch a part of it. So, for example, on Medi-Cal, that's a program where we help sign people up. We administer whatever tests the federal government requires to make sure people are eligible, do all of that work. But the actual dollars that are flowing to healthcare providers never pass through the county.
Right.
And so when we talk about that $380 million, which is a very big number, that's not including all the benefits that are going directly to people from the federal government, or going to pay for their health care or those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So it's a much larger number. And it's also important to remember that even if we had that money, the county is not an insurer. Medi-Cal is an insurance program, and that's not not what we do. So we couldn't do that directly. So instead, I think, we will be working with our partners and trying to identify where there are gaps and where there are needs. And we can look at what we can do to help fill in some of those gaps that might be arising because of these cuts, but it's not going to be replacing them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a lot of money. So, but this will be part of that discussion that will emerge and hopefully continue after Tuesday's board meeting. So let's look ahead to the spring when you and your team will be putting together next year's the next fiscal budget for 26-27. How does this year's federal budget impact your work looking ahead? You're always looking ahead. I know you.
Yeah, so I'm often more focused on the coming year than I am on the current year, though this is making me focus more on the current year, on where we are. It obviously does make it harder. I think it's going to be a lot harder getting together those budgets that are relying on the federal funding, trying to understand what these impacts will be and how we address those.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also puts more pressure on the rest of our budget, on our more discretionary budget, to say, what do we really need?
Yeah.
And are there places maybe we need to scale something back in order to put those resources into areas that are lacking because of these federal.
Well, and given how erratic the situation is, how many funds do you need to set aside for the unexpected down the road, right?
And that really is. And you can't prepare for everything and every contingency, but we are trying to be in a place where we can. Unfortunately, we've made great strides. Our board has made great strides in increasing our reserves over the last several years to a higher level. But there's still something like 11% of our general fund operating expenditures. So when you start comparing them to the kinds of impacts we could be seeing, it's still a limited amount.
Yeah. On a personal level, how many budget cycles have you been through? And I'm just curious, have you ever seen a situation like this? Anything comparable?
So I've been working on budgets in this office since 2014.
Okay.
And I've seen some ups and downs. I have not seen anything comparable to this. I will say, 2020, putting together the 2021 budget was crazy. That was a place where we were just compiling the budget as the country essentially shut down with COVID.
Yeah.
And so we had no idea where revenues were going to come. We had no idea what was going to come.
Yeah.
The difference then, I will say, is that we really had a partner in the federal government, and that was both under Trump and under Biden. So we got a lot of support coming down to local entities from there. And so now what's different is instead of looking up and hoping for that support, we're looking up and we're afraid.
Yeah. It's a much different environment. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being here. We can't thank you enough, although we will thank you by giving you one of our SoCo Chat coffee mugs, or your pick if you'd like a water flask or a hat instead. We just deeply appreciate you being here. We want to remind listeners one more time that the special meeting of the Board of Supervisors concerning the federal budget and all that's going on is scheduled for Tuesday, October 14th at 4:30 p.m. in the board chambers at 575 Administration Drive. And I also should note that's actually the second meeting of the day for the board. There's another board meeting I believe starts at 1 that day, right? I think we're starting a little later.
Yes, we'll have another meeting starting earlier in the afternoon, the regular meeting. So that will be the board conducting their regular business. And then at 4:30, after hopefully a brief break, they'll come back and we'll have this special meeting to talk about the federal impact.
Yeah, so don't come at 1 if you want to hear about the federal cuts and everything. Come at 4:30. And, of course, the public is welcome. And to our listeners, we would like to give you a chance to win one of our SoCo Chat mugs or one of our other prizes. Just be the first to answer our trivia question for this week. And that question is, what percentage of the county's total revenues come from state and federal sources? And I'll tell you, it's in our budget, so you can look that up too. If you know, call us at 707-565-2242 or email us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. Submit your answer to us as soon as possible for a chance to win that prize. Also, if you have comments about this or any other segment, or have a suggestion for a topic for a future SoCo Chat discussion, please email us at that same address or call us at 565-2242. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and we hope you continue to follow SoCo Chat on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and, of course, YouTube. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.